Good evening. Good evening. A very, very warm welcome to St. Michael's Church. I noticed that all the candidates are coming and sitting down on the front row, which is lovely, but we've got actually about 20 minutes for them to go walkabout. So I was I'm not quite sure what I was expecting really, other than the fact that there are a lot more of you than I think there was going to be here, so which is lovely. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is the Reverend Phil Goody. I'm the Vicar of Highworth, of Broad Blunsdon, Sevenhampton, Inglesham and Hannington. And I've never done one of these before. So this is a first for me, and I hope everything goes okay. Let me just give you some rules of engagement, all right? For the last couple of weeks, we've been advertising that this event is happening ever since the election was announced. And there's been a phone number at the bottom of the posters for people to call in, and they have. And we've had about 40 or so questions that have come in, and my colleague is sitting behind me, Sally, who is the Area Dean of Swindon, and I have looked through the questions, and we've tried to select an appropriate breadth of questions. So we're trying to balance it between local and national and personal. So we're 3 national, probably 3 local, and maybe 1 character type question. And that's probably all we're going to have time for tonight. I mean, you may think, oh, yeah, but we've got ages. Well, have a think about it. In a few moments, probably in about 15 minutes or so, we're going to invite the candidates to introduce themselves. They'll be given 3 minutes to talk about themselves, their party, their politics, whatever it is they would like to say about the issues that we're facing. And then I will introduce the questions. I will have the questions in front of me, and I will ask if I've got the name, and I've got the name, I think, of everybody who's submitted the questions, and I will ask for you by name to read your question. I hope you've brought it. If not, I can read it on your behalf. okay? But maybe you could stand up and wave and own the fact that it's your question. And I will read the question, and then each of the candidates will be given 1 minute to respond to the question that you've asked. When they've had their chance at saying their response to the question, I will put it back to the audience, and particularly the questioner, and they will then have a minute or so to respond to what they've heard the candidate saying. Is that all clear? Now, I imagine that there will probably be a little bit of difference of opinion and a little bit of argy-bargy going on, which is why I think that even given the candidates 1 minute each and you a minute to respond, that's only 7 minutes, but I imagine that each question may take anything between 10 and 15 minutes to get through, which is why I think that we'll actually only end up with about 6 questions. We're looking to finish, a hard finish at 9:30. If you run out of things to say, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, before 9:30, of course we can go home and watch some telly, but but I don't think that that's kind of fairly realistic. So I'm going to invite the candidates, if you would like to, you can go walk about, or people. There is tea and coffee if you haven't had any yet, and cakes available on my right. There is loos also on my right, your left, through that door there. And if you need to, the exit is on your left, and another exit at the very back of the church behind a sound desk. For those of you who are also not aware of this, the whole event will be recorded in audio and visual, and it will be published on the church's YouTube channel, which is St. Michael's Church, Highworth. If you wish to have a look at it afterwards, the cameras are all pointing at the stage, not at you. So the candidates will be the ones in the frame, and if you would like to look at and review and offer it to your children for posterity, you are very welcome to do so. Okay. Gentlemen, ladies, over to you. Feel free, wander around, stay where you are, natter, talk, or help yourself to a cup of tea or coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could encourage you to take your seats and encourage the candidates to make your way to the platform. Our sound engineer will come and mic you up and make sure that everybody's and do a quick sound check. I'm on again now, I'm told. If you can't hear me, could you please wave? There we go. Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure this evening to welcome to our Highworth hustings 6 of the 7 candidates who are standing for election. In no particular order, just working from left to right. We've got Les Willis standing for Reform UK. Would you like to just say hello, Les, and then we can do a sound check on you? And Debbie Tara Hicks, who's an independent candidate.
Okay. Thank you so much for all coming. Oh,
Debbie, your microphone is attached to you, so you don't need to look at it, you can ignore it, you just speak, and it will find you. Okay? Those are just spare in case yours battery runs out or something. No, you don't need to do that, you can just leave it where it is.
I was coming out.
This also checks to make sure that it's actually switched on. Okay, so Scott Hunter is our trade unionist and socialist coalition.
Hi, thank you very much.
And Andy Bentley is standing for the Green Party. Did that one? Didn't hear that one. Could you just say that again?
Hello, good evening and welcome.
No, it's still not happening.
What if I just talk loudly? No,
Looks like you're on. Are you there yet? No, still not happening. We may need you to... Let's do hello, Will. And this is not Will Smith, as I called him earlier. It's Will Stone.
Unfortunately, I'm not as good looking as Will Smith, but hello and thank you for coming.
Thank you. And last but very much not least, Justin Tomlinson, standing for the Conservative Party.
Good evening, everyone. And my aim tonight, 50-50.
You'll be all right. You'll be all right. I'll here to catch you.
I promise.
Okay, Justin, I think... No? got sound engineer number 2 coming up. Can I say, well, normally we only have me out the front, so it's only one person. And having 6 of you is a challenge to our systems.
It is on. Fixed.
Please bear with us while we sort out the technical issues. I'd rather everything was working right at the beginning than we get halfway through and it goes wrong.
Off. It's on.
Fingers crossed, third time. There we go.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Use that one.
We're up.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Testing, testing, testing.
So yeah, that's working, yeah.
Try again, Andy.
How's about that then?
Yes,
Right.
it's much better.
Can we just check this?
Hello, nice to see you all here this evening.
Yeah, you're coming through.
Just getting on. Still getting streaming right. Okay.
Okay, so without further ado, I think we're probably going to go, I think we'll go in alphabetical order, just to be as fair as possible. So Andy, would you like to be the first up to introduce yourself and what you would like to say to us tonight? By the way, one last little point. Sitting at the front row here is Vicky, and Vicky has 2 bits of paper, one with 30 on it and one with 15. And so when you are approaching 30 seconds to the end, she will hold up the 30, and when you've got 15 seconds to go, she will hold up the 15.
Much. So my name is Andy Bentley. I'm an IT consultant with a degree in engineering. My kids have left home, so I now live in Pinehurst with my dog Bunny the Lurcher, who I got from the SM Dogs Rescue while I was volunteering for them just before they shut down. A lot of you, perhaps here and certainly around the country, will have been losing faith in your politicians. I also stood in 2017 and I checked back at the speech I gave during my introduction then, and happy to say that everything that I said then, I'm going to say again this evening, because that's what I believe in, and I will always be someone who stands up for what they believe in. You won't find me changing my beliefs and what I say just to win your vote. We may not always agree on everything, and I'm sure there are a whole bunch of stuff that you don't agree with me on, but I hope there will be far more that you do. I joined the Green Party because they were the only party offering the sort of change that I wanted to see in the world. They're the only one offering the real investment that we need in our NHS, in our schools, and our public services. They're the only ones offering real action on things like the climate change and protecting our natural world. And they're the only ones offering real change to tackle inequality and to help everyone lead rich and fulfilling lives. If I wanted an easy life in politics, I would have joined one of the old parties, one of the big ones with all the money, but I didn't. I joined the Greens because they are the ones fighting for what I believe in, and I will always stand here and tell you exactly what that is and try and win you over and take you with me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Debbie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Debbie Hicks, and I'm really proud to be standing as the only independent here in Swindon North. We have reached a crisis point in politics in this country, the old, tired uniparty, and that's what they are, of Labour and Conservative, have failed us. They have failed this country, and they failed us as people here in Swindon and around the country. And I'm standing because I am sick of the corruption that runs from top to bottom in this country, in every institution. Every institution. It has to stop. We have to stand up. We have to stop big finance from taking over everything and corrupting everything. And we also have to move away from that two-party system, because there's a famous saying, and I agree with this because I was part of that, from Albert Einstein, who said, insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Insanity to me, and I was once involved in Labour, I've seen what they're like. Insanity to me is to keep voting for this universal party that are controlled by the same interests ultimately. So whatever they breadcrumb at us, ultimately they're not going to change things, and it's going to get worse. And I speak from the heart with this because I have a teenage son who's sat here this evening. And I'm not just saying this to get votes. I'm standing on this platform to speak truth to you about the dire situation we face as parents, grandparents, and as human beings. If we don't get uncontrolled independents to speak up into Parliament, I am fearful that within a year we could be in war restrictions in this country, that the two main parties will not do anything to stop. Let's stand up for the future. Let's be bold, because we can change it if you elect independents that are not controlled. And finally, can I just say, I'm really proud of the fact that I had to scrape together to get my £500 deposit, and that I turned down the offer of a big donation, because I'd rather be able to speak truth to you here than to have all the money to go out and leaflet you all like the other parties. Thank you.
Introduce yourself. Well, I'm Hunter.
Oh my God, all right.
Alphabetical order by surname.
Sure. Hi, I'm Scott Hunter. I'm standing for the Trade Union and Socialist Coalition in North Swindon. I'm a maths teacher at New College. I'm a member of the University and Colleges Union and also Unite the Union. I'm standing in Swindon because in the last 5 years in this country, we have seen the sharpest decline in living standards ever since recorded history in Britain, since about the 1830s. People's wages have fallen or stayed the same while prices have continued to rise. Meanwhile, we've got a record number of billionaires in Britain, and the energy companies and the water companies, privatised water companies, are taking billions out of the public purse and handing them to shareholders. It is our view that none of the other parties have a serious programme to alleviate these conditions for workers, not in 5 or 10 years, but immediately, within the first 100 days, implementing a bold fighting programme to take the wealth off the bosses and use it for the public good. Some say there's no money. We say it's there in the accounts of the billionaires and in the money being given to shareholders, and why should they take another penny out of the public purse when they've already robbed us blind? To fight for this, we think there must be a desperate need of a new mass party of the working class. That is, a party that speaks for the majority, but is also run democratically by workers, trade unionists, socialists, and community campaigners, anti-war campaigners. We are standing in Swindon North as a first step towards building such a party that we think will become even more necessary after an election.
Thank you very much, Scott. Will, you're up next.
I'm Will Stone, your Labour parliamentary candidate for Swindon North, the town I'm born and raised and am proud to call my home. I'm ex-armed forces, I'm a small business owner, and I'm a borough councillor. I put myself forward to stand as your candidate because I believe in service. I served our country in the army, and I'm proud to serve on the council. I want to serve you in Westminster. I love Swindon, and I am proud to call it my home. But I, like many of you, are disappointed in the decline of our country after the last 14 years. We deserve better, you deserve better. Only the Labour Party has a fully funded plan to fix our country. Yet only the Labour Party has a fully funded plan to fix our country and give us what we need. It doesn't matter how you voted in the past, red, blue, green, or yellow. What matters now is a vote for our future. So if you want a strong economy, a government that puts climate change seriously, 13,000 extra community police, more doctors, more nurses, and mental health hubs in schools, I urge you on July 4th to lend me your vote. Vote for change, vote for Labour. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Justin, would you like to introduce?
Thank you. Justin Tomlinson. I'm proud to have served as your MP since 2010, and this is now my 24th year, including my first 10 years as a councillor. I was voted the second most helpful MP out of 650. During my time as a councillor, I had a 100% attendance record. I'm a fellow local resident who shares and understands the issues. I'm the only MP who runs a community office used by over 150 different organisations. And I'm not afraid, both as a councillor and as an MP, to vote against my own party if I think it is the right thing to do for my fellow local residents. Those who've ever worked or supported me know I'm no nonsense. I will stand up for what I think is right, and I'm not a typical politician. I have a brother who votes Labour, a brother who votes SNP, a brother who doesn't vote at all, and a sister who's Lib Dem Green. So we cover all the bases. But I believe in opportunity, and that's what brought me into politics. And I think that's shown most of all in Swindon, with 12,000 more people now in work. And that's what drives the tax revenue that has funded the urgent care and radiotherapy centres, the new £30 million A&E to open next month, the new secondary and primary schools across Swindon, the £21 million IoT, 164 more police officers across Swindon and Wiltshire, £150 million to upgrade roads, the £10 billion Great Western Main Line electrification and new rolling stock. We are seeing a tangible, positive difference in Swindon. But here in Highworth, I have been a strong voice supporting the fantastic volunteers for the Save Highworth Golf Course, securing £2 million for the Warmford Sports Hall, working with shops like the Highworth Emporium, the Old Bakery, Bloomfields and Chloe's Bakery for our thriving community, working with the brilliant town councillors of all political persuasions to champion the local community, working closely with Westrop Surgery to secure more appointments and more GPs. I will always put our community first. This is going to be an incredibly close election, my 6th election, and this is the one where I need you more than ever.
Thank you very much, Justin. And last but not least, could I invite Les to introduce himself and what he stands for?
Okay, I'm Les.
Thank you very much, Les. Okay, we've heard from all of the candidates. As I and Sally have sifted through the many questions that have come, by far and away the majority of those questions have been around climate issues. And so what I would like to do is start with two questions, and we'll kind of bring them together, two different questioners. We're going to ask Alison Williams if she would give her question, and then at the same time, before the candidates answer, I'd like to ask Simon Robertson. Is Simon here as well? Yeah, Simon's here somewhere. I've seen him. If he'd like to give his question at the same time, and then we'll come back to the candidates. So, Alison.
Before I came out, given the massive demonstration in London today from many, many different groups, why have none of the manifestos put climate change and the planet higher up the agenda?
Thank you, Alison.
And I suppose, yes, so my question, maybe broadening it out, is how would you tackle climate change and how would you incentivise the public to play their part in it?
Okay, so basically two sides of the same coin. Why is the climate not higher up your agenda? And how would you incentivize the public in order to actually tackle climate change? Let's start, shall we, with Andy. Again, as this speaks directly to your party. Would you like to kick us off?
I suppose the first thing to say isn't it sad that immediately a question on climate change comes up, we have to come to the Green Party to give you the first answer? Because, frankly, Alison's right that climate change is not high up enough on the agenda of any of the other parties. Thankfully, with the Green Party, tackling the climate change and protecting the natural world around us it runs through everything that we do. When I first joined the Greens, I'd heard of them as climate activists, but it was because of all of their other policies that followed on from that, they were the reason that I joined. How to tackle it? We need to reorganise society and the economy so that we're not constantly going for growth, growth, growth. The sort of growth that we've had has been a cancer.
Well, for about at least 2 weeks, I'm the Net Zero and Energy Security Minister, so this is an issue dear to my heart, and also I'm a father of 2 young children, and we have a responsibility for the next generations. But the UK can be proud. We have gone from just 7% of our energy produced by renewables to now 47%, and we became the first major economy to halve our emissions. I was proud to lead the International Climate Finance delegation in Berlin. We are seen as leaders, and rightly so. We will continue to push and exceed all of our very strong, legally binding targets. But it's not a binary choice between tackling climate change and putting extra costs onto consumers. By being pragmatic, proportionate, and realistic, having a more efficient energy system would lead to lower bills. And finally, those protests today, Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, wonderful organisation, they should be working hand in hand with the Save Highworth Golf Course Committee people to build a long-term sustainable community asset in Highworth, and I will champion that.
Thank you very much. Scott, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you. As long as private ownership of the energy sector continues, there can be no green transition, because private ownership is a system which presupposes competition and exploitation. We say, take the top energy companies into public ownership with compensation paid only on the basis of proven need. That means small shareholders and pension funds would get a payout, but the big shareholders who've taken so much would get nothing. We say you can't control what you don't own. With public ownership of the energy sector and the current polluting industries, we could manage democratically a transition to green energy with full retraining, alternative employment for people employed in polluting industries without loss of pay. Similarly, we reject measures like ULEZ that make the working class pay for a green transition. We say invest massively in public transport infrastructure, using that wealth, again, taking public transport back into public ownership so that we can have a cost-effective, and a cheap fares transport system for all.
Much, Scott. Debbie, would you like to speak to us?
Just picking up on the last comments from the panel, I agree completely with public ownership of energy and our utilities, because we've seen with water the disgrace and lack of safety where profits have taken over from doing what is essential for us, the people, and we're paying for this. But on the issue of climate change, what I'm going to say is probably not going to be popular, but it's something I want you to think about. Climate change, in terms of the net zero in particular plans, which somebody is the minister here for, who evidently has changed their mind on as well, which is quite interesting. But the net zero plans, whatever you think about climate change, and I personally am very skeptical of man-made climate change, not climate change, but man-made climate change, whatever you think, if we start looking into what the net zero plans are, they are a huge money-making scam. With all the big corporations, all the international bodies that are behind it together. That's what it is. It's not about whether you, even if you believe in man-made climate change,
Thank you,
it's
Debbie.
not about reducing carbon, because net zero isn't about reducing it, it's about creating a system
Thank
of
you, Debbie.
inputs. If I could just finish my point, it's about a system of inputs and outputs.
Okay. Les, would you like to respond?
Well, I agree entirely about the net zero. It is a massive drain on this country, and I don't feel that it's money well spent. I think we need to look very seriously at climate change for the future, but there are a lot of other ways of doing it. I mean, when you look at China, they've got 1,500 coal-fired power stations, and we're buying all the time from them. They're building more and more coal-fired power stations, and we're fueling that. Germany's got nearly all coal-fired power stations. We could be doing a lot more to stop these countries producing that. What we produce in this country is a tiny speck when you compare it with the bigger areas around in Europe and America. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Will.
The Labour Party are taking climate change seriously. That is why it is in our 6 pledges. We are going to set up Great British Energy, which is going to boost the economy through thousands of jobs across the country. That is incredibly important. It will also reduce bills, which will incentivise people to buy into it. So we are taking it seriously. We have flagship policies, Great British Energy. We will be making our rivers and streams clean again. It is not something we can ignore, and it is something that we are taking seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Will. Okay, we're going to stay with climate for a little bit longer, but we actually want to focus down into how we, as a local community, and how the climate problems affect us. And so I'd like to ask Linda. Is Linda Harrison here? Thank you, Linda. The microphone will be brought to you if you'd like to offer your question.
If elected, what steps would the candidates take to make Highworth a more environmentally friendly town?
Thank you very much. So, a local person asking about a concern about Highworth being an environmentally friendly town. Okay, so Justin, would you like to kick us off?
So the Highworth community has already had to accept 1,000 new houses to be built over the next 5 years, more than any other community across North Swindon. And in return, I have been a strong champion supporting the fantastic Save Highworth Golf Course volunteers, that community asset should be provided on a long-term peppercorn lease so they can secure grants, work with organisations like the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, so it becomes a natural habitat usable by the local community. And this is not a unique idea. I did the same when I brought forward and shaped the plans for the Tadpole Garden Village, where we made sure there was a green lung all the way around the development, and that was then gifted to the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust, who managed it for the benefit of the community. With all of the wider house building in Swindon, there is an opportunity to do biodiversity trading and using that as a focal point. I cannot thank enough the huge amount of positive and constructive work of both the volunteers of the Save Highworth Golf Course Committee and also the Town Council and the Borough Councillors who have made sure collectively they've championed the environment right here on the doorstep in Highworth.
Thank you very much. Les, local Highworth issue.
Well, first of all, I would like to say, whether we like it or not, the mass immigration into this country has destroyed thousands of acres of our farmland, and it's time it was stopped. At the moment, we're having to build about 1.5 houses a day just to keep up with the number of people coming in. Over the last 2 years, we've had some amazing amount of people. There's 2 million people have come into this country. Okay, some will have left, but they want homes. Our children want homes. And as you drive around the area, the houses are getting more and more and more. I mean, it's okay, you can't keep going like that. We have to control immigration.
Thank you, Les. Scott.
Well, I'll start off by saying, although we have a risk getting sidetracked onto the point of housing, there are more empty domiciles in Britain today than there are actually homeless people or people wanting homes. Why is all this private property stock allowed to go into the hands of mega landlords who hoard it and jack up the prices? When supply is greater than demand, why is the price not coming down? Let's have a campaign, a mass council house building campaign of environmentally sustainable social housing offered at reasonable rents with lifetime tenancies. The land of the local area should be democratically controlled by the people who live here and local workers who should have a say in how it's used. Moreover, I'd like to bring up the problem of public transport, the bus services that have been cut in this area for many years. Let's take those bus services, again, back into public ownership so that plug the local government funding gap so that those bus services can be restored and cheaply priced as well.
Thank you, Scott. Andy, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, as a couple of the other people have already mentioned, housing is a big one. So in the Green Party, funnily enough, when we see an area like the golf course, our first instinct isn't to build houses on it, it's to rewild it. I'm the chair of a small environmental charity between Gorse Hill and Pinehurst, which has done exactly that some years ago, stopped house builders coming along, and we put trees on there instead of houses. We have, I think, the right house in the right place at the right price. So we would only allow development where it's appropriate. We'd protect green areas. Your existing housing, we would look to upgrade to the latest environmental standards so that it's cheap to heat. What else? Oh, and also bring unused properties back into service. If you go and have a look at the Green Party manifesto, it's full of bloody good ideas. Improved transport links as well for cycling. Maybe more cycling routes up your local roads.
Thank you very much, Andy. Debbie, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, perhaps I lost track there, but we sort of talked about housing and the environment. So,
And I think the issue is actually about how the environment affects Highworth, and certainly the local people are very aware of the housing issue and the possibility of losing the golf course, which has already been mentioned. In fact, we had a couple of questions about the golf course, but you've mostly covered that already. Okay. But if you'd like to speak to Highworth and its local environment.
Yes, absolutely. I think that housing is part of this. I agree with the panel. I think housing is a problem in the sense of it creates all sorts of other problems if there's not affordable housing for people. And I completely agree with you. I think we do need a big council house building project, but in particular that council housing must not be up for sale, because that has been the biggest effect in this country on housing stock, is the fact that there's not a revolving rental stock anymore, which has pushed people into this ridiculous private market where they've been exploited. So I do agree with that point, but specifically the environment in Highworth, actually the bigger issue we're not talking about is the biggest impact on our environment in this country is the fact, putting climate change or whatever you think about that net zero aside, is that we all, I've had to do it, we all have to travel sometimes ridiculous distances to go to work. And what we need in this country is we need a brave, bold government, a new set of politicians that will actually say, let's go back to a mixed economy where we're not relying on these global giants all the time, and we reinvest in the British economy, British workers, and in our local communities. Thank you.
Trying to keep everybody to the same amount of time. I said I'm trying to keep everybody to the same amount of time, so if you could keep your comments brief, we'd appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, have I missed anybody out? Yes, Will, would you like to speak to the Highworth environment?
I would love to. So this is actually something that me and Justin agree on. So as soon as I became the candidate, I wrote to the leader of the council, Jim Robbins, requesting the Highworth Golf Course to be passed across back to Highworth Town Council. There's nothing between the parties on this. It's good for biodiversity and it's good for town. But I also agree with Scott on this as well. To set up bus companies so they can increase the amount of buses, which means people can get off the road in their cars and back into public transport. So we do have a plan which covers both. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And interesting you would finish on that point, because the next question I'd like to ask Ruth Hubbard to put, please, and it is about public services. Where's Ruth? There we are.
Good evening. If we are to have learned anything from the pandemic, we must realise the importance of all of our public services and how we all need help at some point in our lives, rich or poor, and yet all these services have been brought to their knees and staff are at breaking point. How does your party intend to bring all local and national public services, including the NHS, back to a sustainable functioning level?
So a very wide-ranging question there. Public services, but that also obviously includes some of our national institutions like the NHS, as well as rail and local bus transport and so on. Okay, so let's, Will, we finished with you, so let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, so none of our public services are working. We have the highest wait times in the NHS currently. We have a 50% increase in knife crime, and our armed forces are the smallest they've been since the Napoleonic War. What we have to do when we're looking at these things is reform. When we're looking at the NHS, we have to take care into the community. And that's why I'm proud Labour are going to open up a national care service, which will take the burden from the hospital and allow the hospitals to crack on how they need to. We're also going to have 13,000 new community police paid for by procurement of services. And we're going to invest in 2.5% of GDP in the armed forces and have 4 new nuclear submarines to keep us safe. So the Labour Party is the party of national service, and we are on your side.
Thank you very much. Justin.
We have, because of record employment, 1.1 million more businesses been able to generate the tax revenue to deliver record funding for our public services. Take health, the NHS, £920 million a week more. And that in Swindon means 236 more doctors at the GWH, 533 more nurses, 49 more GPs across Swindon, offering 220,000 more GP appointments per year. I work very closely with the Westrop surgery team as we navigate the additional housing that is coming Highworth's way. 20,000 more police officers, 8,000 more promised in the next election, which is why serious crime is down 55%. School standards gone from 68% good or outstanding to 90%. And we have committed, the only party to commit to a 2.5% of GDP to be spent on defence, an increase of £23 billion. And all this despite the challenges of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and COVID.
Thank you very much. Les.
Right, well, first of all, the major problems that we're having in the NHS at the moment, we can lay right at the feet of the Tory party and the Labour Party. They started, these PFI schemes were started by the Tories, and the Labour carried them on. We are in so much debt with the NHS because of that. And it's just amazing that they thought it was a good idea. I read the other day that in one PFI hospital, they called somebody in from whoever owned it to change a light bulb, and they were charged £233 to change an ordinary light bulb. And I think we've got to seriously look at that. The number of trusts we've got in here, we've got senior managers, CEOs, we don't need them. We need to cut out the dead wood and put the money in the frontline services.
Andy, social services and...
Social services, well, that's something where a nuclear submarine is not going to help. The Green Party are the only ones really being honest with you about the scale of the problem that we're facing as a country and our NHS and our schools. And we're the only ones who have committed the amount of money that's actually going to be needed to make any sort of dent in it. The others, when it comes to the NHS, are just offering you sticking plasters. One thing we would do, roll back privatisation. If you want more privatisation of your NHS, you can vote for Justin or you can vote for Will. Vote for the Green Party if you want to see that rolled back. Across the board, we would improve services by putting more money in. We would repair the crumbling buildings, schools and hospitals. And we would retain staff better by improving their pay and the amount of respect that they are given by the government.
Thank you very much. Scott.
Thank you. Working in education, I see every day the disastrous impact that the last 14 years of Tory rule and New Labour before that has had on our public services. We say stop and reverse all privatisation, bring all public services back into full public ownership, reconstitute the NHS under the democratic control of NHS staff and service users. We say scrap all PFI debt, scrap tuition fees so that we can bring back student grants so that we can train up the next generation of nurses, doctors, teachers, and take that money to fund it out from the purses of the billionaires. The wealth is there. We've just got to get organised and go after it.
If you don't mind me coming back to you on that, I am a little bit concerned with just take the money from the billionaires and that would be enough to cover actually refunding social services. Do you want to expand? Could you expand on that just a little bit?
Well, how many hundreds of billions of pounds are being paid out to shareholders of these massive companies are sitting in the coffers of billionaires and so on, all the British billionaires that have been created? Why are we allowing them to extract that money out of the public purse, essentially, all this PFI debt? We can, through Act of Parliament, take that wealth and use it for the public good.
Thank you. Justin, I've offered an extra. Would you like to kind of come back on that?
Well, at the end of the day, by supporting businesses, they generate both the tax revenue and they generate the jobs. And here in Swindon, that means 12,000 more people than in 2010 are now in employment, 22,000 apprentices. And that is what creates opportunity, which is what got me into politics. So I respectfully disagree.
Okay. Debbie, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, I think 2 points I'm going to pick up on there. I do agree that the ultra-rich and the billionaires and the corporations are squandering, taking most of the money and not putting it back into public services and the NHS with the PFI. But I think there is a point that's been made here. I've been looking recently at the statistics and at the numbers of what's being spent in the NHS, and there are billions of pounds being spent on other things that are completely unnecessary. For instance, there is, I think, 30 million being spent on net zero measures in the NHS. There's also criminal negligence claims that also, I think, make up about 2 billion a year, together with the 2 billion of the private finance initiative. So there's loads of things we can do to save money that are completely unnecessary in the NHS. So I think that's the biggest thing, is reorganise the NHS, tear it up, start from scratch, and reorganising it and make it publicly accountable in terms of its supplies, staff.
Thank you, Debbie.
Bring it back in-house.
Okay. I mean, again, the original question, actually, the NHS was only part of it. you've all focused particularly on the NHS, but there are lots of other public services that are part of how we live our lives, not least of which transport system, buses, trains, and so on. It'd be interesting to hear some wider views than just about the NHS. But Les, would you like to speak
yes,
to us?
I've been listening to all this, and I'm afraid this panacea about putting public transport on is all very well, but what about the people who work shifts, who work nights, and work in places where there's no bus service? It's pretty idyllic, but if you're going to spend that amount of money, you're not going to serve everybody with that. And the other thing I would say about the council houses that they're going to build, all this social housing, whatever you want to call it, I'd draw your attention at the moment, Green Square Accord are one of the biggest council house owners in this country, and they are actually selling council houses because they are so far in debt. They're a private company making profit. Their CEO had a wage rise last year, went from 245,000 to 275,000, and now they're selling properties off. So if we go down this route of building more, are they just going to be sold off?
But that's not council.
Well, social housing.
Okay. Where have we got to? Andy.
You've done me already.
Have I done you already?
I'm happy to go again.
I've done, no. I was okay. Scott, I think. Is it Scott? I've done you. Who have I missed? You've all had a go at that one. I told you I was new at this. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that. We're going to stay again with the economy, but this time looking at it from a slightly different perspective. Phil, have we got Phil Baker here? Right at the back. Phil is going to look at, let Phil say.
Since 2010, there's been a rapid rise in the number of food banks. Could be called a growth industry, I suppose. Could the candidates suggest reasons for this increase and what their parties are going to do to eradicate the need for food banks? I speak as someone who's involved in a food bank and has seen the extreme poverty that is in our area and having to be served in that way.
Can I just thank you very much, Phil. Food banks seem to be now part of our culture, but I would like to include in this, if you wish to, free school meals, okay, because they also seem to be part of where we're at with the poverty that seems to be part of our endemic within our society, or a growing issue within our society. So Les, let's start with you.
Okay, well, as I said earlier on, we're going to raise the tax threshold to 20,000 a year to help people get off of the dole. Now, if people have got good jobs and are earning plenty of money, we won't need all these food banks. And for years, we had plenty of industry in this country, but again, the Tories and the Labour Party just let it slip through our fingers. For example, Honda, I'm sure if the Tory party had stepped in, they could have done something to stop them moving. The railway works, I know it was a long time ago, but they could have saved it. There was Shawco Films down in Cheney Manor. German firm came in, bought it, and used EU money to move it back to Germany. And no government lifted a finger to stop it. We need more industry and well-paid jobs.
Thank you very much, Les. Scott, would you like to speak to
Yes.
this?
Well, I think the reason why food bank use has increased is quite simple. Prices have risen faster than wages. And when prices rise faster than your wages, there'll come a point where you can't afford to eat. We say, as trade unionists and socialists, £15 an hour minimum wage, linked to the rise of inflation or the rise in prices. We say full employment rights at work from day one, scrap 0 hours contacts and exploitative employment agreements. We also say scrap all the anti-trade union legislation, not just the recent ones, but going back to Thatcher as well. We have seen in the past few years many groups of workers bravely take to picket lines and fight for their rights at work and their pay. I've been on just about every picket line that's been going on in Swindon. I've been on my own picket line. We need strong trade unions to hold the bosses to account.
Thank you very much, Scott. Justin.
1 minute doesn't really do this justice. I used to serve in the DWP. First of all, Phil Baker, thank you for what, as a fellow football fan, what you and your team do in the community, helping some of the most vulnerable people. I'm proud that there are now 400,000 fewer children in absolute poverty. That is partly driven through our record employment, creating opportunities, made easier now. Our schools have been transformed with now 90% either good or outstanding, and our rapid expansion of apprenticeships, T-levels, and other more suitable opportunities for young people to progress. We've reformed benefits so they are less complex. Under the old legacy benefits, 700,000 people a month missed out on £2.7 billion worth of support they should have got. We introduced the national living wage and it's increased above inflation every single year, worth £4,000 a year. Doubled income tax thresholds worth £1,200, and we've doubled free childcare. It all comes back to opportunity. If you give people the right skills, the right wraparound support, and simplify what is an incredibly complex system, you give the best chance of all people having a good life.
Thank you very much, Will. Thank you. And Will.
Thank you for the question. So it breaks my heart the amount of food banks we have in this country. It is a failure of state, to put it simply. This is not something we had in 2010 under the Labour government. But what we have to do, it was clearly not as many as there are now, is it? I didn't interrupt you when you were talking in your false figures on the benefits. So what we have to do is a two-pronged approach. One is we have to give a real living wage. We have to ban fire and rehire, and we have to end zero-hour contracts so we can support people in the workforce. And secondly, we have to reform the job centre. We have to tie it in with apprenticeships and colleges to get people into dignified work that they actually want to do. And that is how we end food banks. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie, would you like?
Yeah, this is a very personal topic for me because my elderly mum was evicted from her private rented property in Swindon about 3 months ago, and I had to deal with the horror of Swindon Council and their inhumanity towards my mother, who was almost on the streets. My mum also had to access a food bank for the first time in her life as a very proud woman who'd always been very independent. And that was no fault of her own because she'd only missed 1 month's rent and it reached that situation. So we have to look at these evictions that are happening and we have to change that around the country. We have to give people more rights in that way. I think also in terms of food banks, why are people accessing food banks? The elderly are accessing them because we've got this growing horror of the elderly having to work through their retirement, which is a disgrace. What's happened to the WASPy women? The fact that they've missed out on some of that entitlement they put into, and that has to be corrected, and they have to be compensated. So we have elderly poverty as well, which is a disgrace. And we also need to look at the minimum wage, I agree, but we also need to stop the waste of money that's going into private rackets and reinvest it. Thank you.
Who have I? Yep, Andy?
Yeah. One thing that always strikes me when you see a food bank opening is the smiling face of the politician who's gone along for a photo opportunity, when rather than smiling, they should be showing like deep shame that that's what it's come to. A couple of easy things. Lift 250,000 children out of poverty by ending the two-child benefit cap. Green Party policy. If you want to keep it, you can vote Labour or you can vote Tory. Doesn't make a difference. Other people have mentioned minimum wage. We would raise it to 15 quid. We'd also look at a universal basic income. We'd study that so that everybody is guaranteed an amount of money each month that they can rely on, and they never have to worry about making a choice between keeping a roof over their head and putting food on the table.
Thank you very much, Andy. Is there anyone who I haven't actually asked to speak yet? So I'm going to seems like quite a hot topic to me in that people are quite emotive about it. I'd like to offer the opportunity to you to come back to the candidates. The microphone will be moving amongst you. If you want to actually make a comment, would you like to raise your hand, and we'll have 2 or 3 comments from the floor. Gentleman on the front row here.
Sorry, I'd just like to point out that nobody actually addressed the causes of this. And to a large extent, it was 2 major things. We've seen inflation go incredibly high. Why have we seen that? We've seen £450 billion wasted on lockdown measures that were unnecessary. And we've seen hundreds of billions of pounds of quantitative easing put into the economy. When you throw that much money around, massively increase public debt, you get inflation. Inflation causes poverty. I would like to have seen one of the candidates acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a lady here on the front row with the green cardigan.
Thank you. One of the main reasons for the fact we have food banks is the unnecessary austerity we had post the banking crisis. In 2008, the fact that now jobs are mostly part-time, 0-hour contracts. We also have obviously the 2-child benefit cap. We've also got universal credit and the 5-week wait, and the fact that universal credit, rolling into 6 benefits, was actually designed to take money out of the system, which supported people where necessary.
Thank you very much. One more comment on this from the floor, right at the very back on the sound desk.
It's just a comment. We're hearing a lot of facts and figures from the people at the front, and we don't have a live fact-checking service in the hall, except that we do at the back here. And the reality is actually that the number of children in absolute poverty fell by 100,000 from 2010 to 2023, if you take into account housing costs, and it rose by 100,000 if you take it before housing costs. That's not my point. My point is there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of misdirection coming from all parties in this election. How do we get back to some trust and some integrity in our politics? That's really what we need, so that we can actually believe what we're hearing.
Thank you very much. So again, coming back to the candidates, that very last point made from the back there was one of the points made on the national debate. How do we get back to trusting our candidates, but will give us integrity and honesty if we elect you? Let me put that one to all of you. And again, let's start with Will this time.
So we have seen an erosion of trust in our politics. It's not just here in our country, it's across the world. And I think what we need to do, and what we have done as a Labour Party, is put forward a sensible, fully costed manifesto that people can believe in. We are the only party which have a £2.5 billion buffer of what we are going to be spending versus what is going to be coming in. Trust starts with the manifesto. There are so many things I wish we could have put in. I wish we could have changed different things, but we have to be realistic, and we have to build trust with that. So that is where we start with it. Put forward a manifesto that we can deliver in, and I'm proud of ours.
Thank you, Will. Les, how can we build respect and trust?
Well, first of all, the gentleman's point over here about quantitative easing. The Bank of England, when they do the quantitative easing, they go to the other banks and they are paying billions in interest. We are the only country in the world that allows the bank to do this. It's sapping billions out of our economy. And one of our projects is, we've actually said in our policies, we are going to stop that. So that will put a lot more money back into the economy. And I think over the years that the two main parties, and all of us because of this, are fed up with ping-pong politics. You get the Labour will come in for a few years, they mess it up, then the Tories come in and mess it up, then Labour come in and mess it up. We need something different. And you will get that from the Reform Party.
Thank you. Debbie, how can we have integrity in our politics again?
Yeah, we have to move away from the two-party system. Somebody in the audience spoke about proportional representation to me. To change the voting system that's more proportional, we need a proper PR system, not the the hash that was offered under the Liberal Democrats and the Tories when they went into coalition together, which wasn't really PR. So we need to change the voting system so that everybody's represented, all of us, but no matter what we think of each other. Another thing, this goes out to everybody in Swindon, all candidates and incumbents in Swindon should have hustings like this everywhere in Swindon, because I think it's a disgrace this is the only hustings in Swindon, when in Swindon South it's more marginal, and there are other independents and other parties here that deserve their voice. So, you know, this is down to you in your society, in your communities, to also speak up and say, we want hustings. And I'm going to use this occasion to call on Swindon South and Swindon North to join us in the town centre with the people in the rundown town centre that you've all neglected, and speak directly to the public with us here on the panel. Let's have a great big hustings.
Thank
democracy.
you, Debbie. Justin.
We all collectively have a duty to improve the standing of politicians. It is a plague on all of our houses, regardless of who is responsible. Now, I can be responsible for my own actions. If it was down to me, all MPs should live in the community they represent. How can you represent people unless you share and understand the issues? I've always responded personally to residents who have either agreed or disagreed with my voting record in Parliament. The last time I spoke here was following my vote for equal marriage, which at the time was not a popular move, but it was quite right I would be held to account. Now, I'm proud to have been voted the second most helpful MP because I take casework and supporting people in my community as the #1 priority. I support and champion local charities and businesses and community groups, and I am visible. And I've always made sure that I never mention my opponents in my election literature. It is 50% what I've done, 50% what I want to do, and either I'm good enough to represent you or I don't deserve to. That's democracy.
Thank you, Scott. Scott, integrity.
In the first place, we call for a workers' MP on a workers' wage. You can't represent a group of people if you're taking a parliamentary salary of so many times more what people are earning. Any Tusk candidate, including myself, if elected, will take the average wage of a worker in our constituency and give the rest back to the trade union movement. Second of all, we campaign for the right of recall at any time. The electorate, if they're not happy with the job their representative is doing, should be able to democratically recall and reselect that candidate. But and the final thing is we stand for building a new mass workers' party that is democratically run by workers and trade unions with control over policy and candidature.
Thank you, Scott. Andy.
The first thing is we need to be able to properly hold MPs to account. And if an MP stands in front of Parliament and tells a lie, they should be able to be called out for telling a lie. And no sort of gentleman's agreement to let them get away with it. There should be real sanctions against an MP when they're caught doing something dodgy. Not just standing up in front of Parliament and saying, oh, sorry, won't do it again. Recall's been mentioned. Let's give voters more powers to actually get rid of a dodgy MP when they have done something outrageous, and real consequences. And very often it's down to the voting system, as others have said. A lot of people think that they've stuck between either of the two old parties. We need to reform it so that the other parties, with people like me, have a better chance of being elected.
Thank you all very much. Okay, we've been sitting, listening, or standing and listening to each other. I'm going to ask for just a 2 or 3 minute break for a moment. Have I missed somebody out? No, I think I've covered everybody. Yep. If you need to stand up and turn around and sit down again, stretch your legs, and then we will start the next question in 2 minutes' time. Take a break if you need it. Warning.
Yeah, so I think you've got the other two questions.
I've got disability, happiness,
and then
any of those that we can
that's
fit in.
such a good question, I think, mental health.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, could I encourage you to make your way back to your seats, and we will pick it up in just a moment. Okay, could the candidates come back to the stage, please? All right, we've been rattling through the questions tonight, and I want to actually change the format just a little bit. I'm informed that a number of people haven't had their supper yet, so finishing early would be of benefit to some of you. So what we're going to do is we will continue with the question format until 9 o'clock. Then I'm going to ask each of the candidates to give a 2-minute kind of reflection on, well, can say anything I like, really. And then we will call a halt at probably be about 9:15. All right? So let's kick off. This is a question from me personally. My wife is a qualified teacher. She teaches maths, which is in hugely short supply. But for the last, because of childcare and a variety of other conditions, she's had to work as a TA, if you know what a TA is. And one of the things that worries her is that even though she is working as a TA and many of her other colleagues are put in charge of classes. Now, she's got the qualifications to do it because she's actually a teacher, but she still obviously gets paid as a TA. And many of the TAs with no qualifications are asked to look after classes of children during when teachers are off sick or anything, with no actual qualifications, and the pay level is still minimum wage. How would you address these issues of inequality within the education system? Let's start with Justin. Would you like to?
I'm actually from a family of teachers. My dad, grandma, granddad, cousin Imogen, all teachers. And that's, I think, why I enjoy doing so many school assemblies and providing my summer work experience programme. There is an inner teacher in me somewhere, and I want to pay tribute to the fantastic work local teachers, teaching assistants and all the other support staff. And with my eldest daughter now starting school, I'm seeing what a transformation the school system has. And that's why I keep highlighting the fact that we've now got 90% of schools as good or outstanding. Rightly, we've raised the entry-level payment for teachers, and we are offering priority payments for the subjects like maths, where there is still a shortage, to encourage more people into training, and also addressing the issue, the growing demand around SEM provision. And I very much welcome the fact that we will provide funding for an additional 60,000 places in 50 new special education schools. If we are going to equip the next generation, and I say this as somebody who came from a school bottom of the league tables, we need to make sure our school system is the envy of the world, and that's why I'm proud we now have the best readers in the whole of the world.
Thank you very much. Les, would you like to comment on the state of our education system?
Well, I think it basically comes down over the last 20 years to poor management of the economy, and there's no money to pay for the proper teachers. And I think another thing we've got to do is increase the police force, because I've been talking to teachers, and the aggression and the anger that they have to suffer in schools is getting worse and worse. And it's all very well the parties here saying, oh, well, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Well, they've had 20 years to do it, and it's not happened. It's just getting worse and worse. So we need to get the economy back online and pay people properly.
On that front, I mean, thank you very much. Thank you very much. On that front, interestingly, if you look at the way the education system happens in other parts of the world, and particularly in Scandinavia, teachers aren't allowed through the door of schools unless they've got a doctorate. And where we often, people put in front of our children and teachers, teaching assistants, often have minimal or little qualification. I mean, teachers have to have a degree, but actually how much do we value our children and how much are we willing to invest in them? Will, education.
So it comes down to trying to get more teachers, because the issue which your wife is facing is she's having to step up because there is a lack of teachers. What Labour are going to do, and it's not popular in all circles, but we're going to put VAT on private schools to get 6,500 teachers. We're also going to incentivise new teachers to stay by giving them a £2,500 grant after they've completed their first term. So this is how we are going to try and address the issue, but it's about getting more people wanting to be teachers, which alleviates the pressure on the TAs.
Debbie.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a teacher, worked in colleges, schools, even a bit in a university for over 20 years until recently. And what I've seen happen to education in this country under both governments, Labour and Tory, has been an absolute disgrace what it's done to the teaching profession. It's played people off against each other, which is in response to your point. And like the NHS, which we haven't mentioned today, the use of agency teachers has undermined teachers and their pay. Because actually there is a lot of money being spent, but it's going on overpriced, paying too much for agency staff. That needs to stop, and it needs to be invested back into teachers and their job, so that teaching assistants can do what they do and teachers do what they do. We need to get rid of academies. They're just basically a way of putting money into the pockets of people through trust. That's all they are. And they're run by managers, not teachers most of the time, who don't understand education. And can we please get rid of the bureaucracy that plagues every teacher's life and everyone who works in a school when they should be teaching and caring. That's the most important thing, caring for the kids.
Thank you, Debbie. Andy.
So Les said something earlier about there not being the money. Well, there is the money. You've just got to choose where you want to spend it and who you're going to tax to get it. We would tax the most wealthy people in the country more. My daughter and her partner have both been TAs in the past, and as Debbie said, they were both hired through an agency. I would like to see schools given the money so that they can recruit permanent staff themselves, not have to pay agency rates. And I'd also like to see the people working as teachers and TAs both given a fair amount of pay and also good career progression, so that being a TA should be seen as a valuable career that you could path to follow.
Thank you very much, Andy. And finally on this question of education, Scott.
Well, we've got Justin from a family of teachers and Debbie, who's a former teacher, and I actually am currently a teacher. So something about North Swindon has attracted an academic air. Look, the points I want to make are simple. Yes, end academisation. Bring not just schools, but colleges, nurseries, back into local authority control. Bring back the local authority supply pools. So again, all this money isn't going out to agencies, and one hand knows what the other hand is doing with the council and arranging supply. And fully fund our schools. Integrate that with nursery care, primary, secondary education, further education, and universities to have a fully funded national school system.
Thank you very much, Scott. Is there anybody who would like to comment about the state of our education system from the floor? No? Oh, one person at the back there. Thank you. Or two people, another lady here. So there's a lady at the back on my right.
Well, how about nursery schools? We need more of them.
More
Yeah,
nursery schools.
yeah.
Okay. Yep. And at the front here with the red cardigan. Wait, hang on a sec.
I think the question of pay, because thousands of teachers leave the profession, the classes are overcrowded and they're not earning the money, so thousands leave. Within 5 years, I think it's quite a large percentage are leaving. And somebody mentioned special education needs. I saw the programme yesterday about the way in which autistic children are treated by unqualified staff run by private companies. I think we need to get private companies out of education.
Mm-hmm. Education is a big part of my life. Obviously, I'm married to a teacher. But one of the things I am very aware of, and thank you for that comment, is people with additional needs. I have 2 grandchildren, both of whom are on the autistic spectrum. One has been tested and had the testing before COVID, but the other child, who is obviously with exactly the same symptoms, has yet to be statemented as part of the system because there's a 2-year waiting list on addressing children with special needs, and because there isn't the people there. So can I ask the panel, how would you address we've talked about the difficulties within the NHS of finding appropriate staff and paying for them. How would you you've talked about increasing salaries of teachers and maybe TAs, but it's not but we've heard that actually there's a hemorrhage of teachers. So how would you incentivize people to come into the education system to actually do the job properly? Let's start in the middle again. So Scott.
Thank you. It's a simple question of pay and workload as well. We know teachers today, their pay has not kept up with the cost of living. We know that they're taking on a higher workload than ever before. It's a simple matter of funding. If you, first of all, increase the pay, and that will attract people to the profession, but also if you, again, through attracting more staff, you decrease the workload. And for that is a question of bringing those institutions back into public ownership so we can set a authority-wide rate of pay that can be collectively negotiated between all school staff and the local government. And it's about having a fully funded higher education system so people aren't leaving university saddled with tens of thousands of debt.
Okay, thank you. Will, how would you incentivize people in the education system given the hemorrhaging of our teachers?
So in my first response, I addressed how we're going to incentivize more teachers with a payment scheme. But one thing we are going to look to do is reform Ofsted. And this will make teachers' lives significantly easier. They're not going to be constantly stressed about, is an inspector coming in? Do they have to meet that? Do they have to do this? It's going to be about training head teachers, and Ofsted is going to be used to make schools better. It's about growth and making schools achieve what they need to achieve by collaboration as opposed to punishment and failure. So that's how we can make teachers' lives slightly easier in the classroom.
Thank you very much. Les.
Well, I think, first of all, as I said earlier on, we've got to make teachers feel safe in the classroom. There's a lot of areas where there is trouble and they are leaving. Secondly, I think that the policy I've heard from the Labour Party, who are going to be bashing private schools and taxing them, a lot of them will close, and a lot of people who have been struggling to keep their children there will not be able to afford it any longer. So they will leave, and they will be going to ordinary schools, and that will put the class sizes up, and who will end up paying for it? It's going to be us.
Thank you, Les.
I've obviously already set out rightly around the actions we're taking on pay, the priority payments and the subjects where there are the biggest pressures. I actually do agree with Leslie on the point around respect. Many of my friends are currently teachers, and it has become, in some cases, sadly, a challenge, as there isn't always everybody working in the same direction for the benefit of the children. We absolutely have to deal with those waiting lists around SEN provision. I'm very proud that I'm the second longest serving disabilities minister. It was easily the most rewarding part of my 24 years of service, as you can unlock potential too often overlooked and ignored by the wider society. And there's been a real transformation of the acceptance of collective support for those either with physical or hidden disabilities. And finally, the subject I've spoken second most on in Parliament after disabilities was the early years and nurseries, going to the early point, which is a key stepping stone to future opportunities.
Thank you very much. Justin. Debbie.
Yeah, it's not an obvious answer, but I've been thinking about it as the panel have been talking, is the problem we've got in our education system is because children are being brought up in a society that's so dysfunctional and there's so much poverty. If you look at the rates of special educational needs, it has directly gone up with that in our society. So there is a strong link, and that has to be understood no matter what we try and do in the schools. And it does help, better train the teachers about SEN, make sure there's proper SENCOs, and that's the problem, because there's not any proper special educational needs officers in schools. The teachers are having to do it now, and they're not trained to do it. But unless we address poverty by reinvesting in public services so they're affordable, the minimum wage, looking at, the Sure Start centres, actually, as much as I detest Labour for what they've done, it was a really good thing, I think, bring those back. And also childcare, make it affordable for people. So there's a balance between working and children. There's so much we need to do in it. I don't think it starts in the school. I think it starts with the economy.
Thank you. And finally, Andy.
Leslie's worried about a flood of privileged children from private schools flooding into the comprehensive system. Imagine how much better our comprehensive system would soon be if all those kids from Eton were forced to go to their local comprehensive. I'm sure the government sorted it out pretty bloody quick then. Coming back to special educational needs, which I think was the original question, as well as providing extra funding for schools to cater for all children and improve pay for teachers, we would, in the Green Party, be providing extra funding to build the facilities in all schools so that children with special educational need can be properly integrated into their schools. And just a quick one, we would actually abolish Ofsted because we agree that it has failed and it needs to be replaced with something different.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we're going to come back to questions from the floor now. Do we have Helen Bowie here? Yep, Helen, you've got a question about UK government and disability convention.
Got me to find the text. Right, so... Right then, here we go. In 2016, the UN found the UK government guilty of grave and systemic violations of the UN Disability Convention. Today, they continue to insult us with failure to fix original violations and continue to regress our rights 7 years on. What are the first 3 things you would do to improve the lives of disabled people?
Thank you very much. Obviously, a passion for you. 3 things that you would do to improve disabled people's lives. Justin.
I was very proud to have the opportunity to directly do something in this area, having served as the Disability Minister, and I'm proud that we now provide an additional £12 billion a year in disability support. If you have a mental health condition, you are now 6 times more likely to receive the highest level of support than before we made those changes. We have record disability employment, 1.5 million more disabled people able to work. I've pushed really hard on better in-work support to stop people crashing out of the system. And I was able to deliver the very first cross-government disability strategy. And whoever forms the next government, I hope this is something that they will continue to do on an annual basis. A lot of organisations and individuals in Swindon directly shaped that strategy, and it brought the cross-government focus, the ownership of each and every single department to make sure that everybody collectively did their bit year on year. So whoever is the government, I hope they take that up and do it annually.
Thank you very much, Justin. Let's go to the other end. Les.
Okay, could we have the microphone back for this lady, please? I believe the Reform Party listens to people. We've been talking to people all about it. I'd like you to tell us what you think would help.
Not end sanctions for disabled people.
Okay.
I would bring back independent living.
Yep.
And I would take a good look, hard look at what the ground systematic violations have been, and come up with an action plan to resolve it.
Yeah. Well, I spent 21 years in the NHS working with adults with learning disabilities in Swindon, and I truly believe that people like you who can tell us what you want are the way forward. It's no use us standing up here and say, oh, we're going to do this. And it should be down to people like you to tell us what you want, and we then carry that out. Thank you.
Very much. Will.
So I do agree with Les. I think we have to engage more with the community. I would like to work alongside local councils to ensure that they are doing as much as they can to support the disability community, be that with accessible play equipment, looking at planning developments going forward to make sure we have dropped curbs and we have spots for blind people so they can feel it with their stick. But I think another thing we have to look at and we have to address straight away is the Conservatives' proposed change to PIP. With that, not all disabilities are visible. We need to make sure everybody can be entitled to PIP who is able, so they can have access and mobility across the country.
Thank you very much, Will. Debbie.
Yeah, I pick up on that point. I think what the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak has announced of taking what I think amounts to into billions, I think, altogether, what he's proposing from people that on disability benefits is a disgrace. I've recently been diagnosed with, I've got hearing aids on, I know it's hard to believe at my age, with a hearing loss, and I'm looking into applying for PIP. And I'll be honest with you, I know what it's like, because I used to help people like yourself when I worked for CAB for a while. I'm actually dreading it, having to make this application, because I know it's probably going to fail, and I'm entitled to it. You know, I'm entitled to that help, because I struggle to hear at times what people are saying. And I think it's a disgrace that billions of pounds of our money is being sent for war in other countries when it should be spent on our benefits for our most disabled and our most vulnerable people. It's absolute disgrace that the Tories are doing this. And I'm sorry, but Labour, you're just breadcrumbing. You're not going much further either. It needs to be adequate support there, much more investment in our benefit system, making sure it's fair, of course, and making sure the people that need it the most get it.
Thank you, Debbie. Andy, 3 things you would do to support disabled people.
So Greens are always big on public transport, but I know that very often that's difficult to navigate if you've got a physical disability. So trains, buses, even planes. Improving access in general to services, whether that's enabling you to access a building or to perform a certain role at work, needs support. And I know there is some legislation on that already, but it's often not enforced enough, if at all. And then the last thing on my list is stop demonising disabled people when it comes to claiming things like PIP and whatever. And we've seen the Tory government recently in their manifesto, yeah, they're going to clamp down on you scroungers, like they always say.
And Scott.
Thank you. The benefit system needs to be completely reformed. Scrap PIP and humiliating PIP interviews and assessments and so on. Stop means testing and bring in a living benefit for all who need to claim it that represents a real living wage that's linked to the cost of living. The second thing is social housing. End the practice of exploitative landlords, clamp down on exploitative landlords, and make sure that there's secure, high-quality housing available at a reasonable price. And the third is to integrate the care sector, bring it into public ownership, and integrate it into the health service so it can be run for all who need it.
Thank you all very much. Okay, we're going to have one last question, which is a little bit more light-hearted. All right, we've covered a wide range of quite challenging subjects tonight, and thank you all, everybody, for those who've called in, those who've written their questions out, and everybody, and thank you particularly for the candidates. So let's finish off. Just one last thing. If you were not going to be here tonight, if you had an evening off and you could do whatever you like to do, what would you be doing? How would you use your night off? Let's start with the end. Over there, Les.
Well, it's quite an easy one. I didn't see my sons last weekend, but this weekend my youngest son's come down from North Wales, and my eldest son is at home as well. I tried to get them to come up here, but they didn't. And we'd be sat having a lovely social evening together with their partners.
Spend the evening with your family.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Debbie.
Yeah, similarly, Saturday nights are normally our curry night. My husband's sat here, and I go to great lengths with all ingredients, fresh ingredients to make an amazing curry. I've mastered them over the years. So I'd probably be doing that tonight with a glass of wine.
Curry and a glass of wine sounds awesome. Okay, Scott, what would you be doing?
Yeah, well, I don't want to seem boring, but it is, I'm a simple person, friends, family, a film or something. I'm sorry, I can't be more exciting than that.
Well, as a teacher, I thought you'd be spending your time preparing your next lesson plan.
Exams are over now. We're planning for next year now, and I've got a bit more time.
Okay. Andy, what would you be doing?
As my dog will be very keen to remind me when I get home, it would be a boring evening. No. It's not boring. A fantastic evening spent with the dog, nice long walk in the countryside, maybe a bit of telly, maybe a bit of Dungeons and Dragons once in a while.
Oh, there you go. Will, what would you be doing?
So I would not be dragging my partner to this. I am so far behind on the latest season of House of Dragons. There's been an episode out. I would love to be watching that, to be honest.
Okay, bit of telly.
I'd like to say it'd be something really exciting, and once a month my wife's mum comes to stay for a long weekend. We've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, so she says, look, I'll look after them when they've gone to bed, you go out and do anything you want. We have so many exciting plans. When it comes to it, we then say, can you please just help with bath and bed? And then we end up watching TV. So probably the best offers I've heard, going round to Will's to watch House of Dragon, bring my 20-sided dice to take an Andy Bentley, and I can't wait to come and try Debbie's curry.
Fantastic. So we can go on.
Forward, we all sit down with the curry and talk to each other, because this is the problem, we don't talk to each other.
Yeah. We haven't been able to get through all of the questions tonight. One of the questions that I would have loved to hear you all answer is what policies that the other parties have would you like to support? So that you're actually, so that to actually get the parties to listen to each other, because all the time we see the different parties always taking an opposite stance on issues which, to be honest, from the floor just sound like common sense if you actually all work together to do it. But we haven't got time for that tonight. But I'd like to finish by inviting each of the candidates just to take a couple of minutes to reflect on the evening, to sum up their particular position and offer some closing thoughts. So we're going to start in the middle. Andy, would you kicked us off at the beginning. You got an opportunity to do it again at the end there.
Hooray. Why vote for the Green Party? Well, this year, it's pretty certain that Labour are going to get a landslide victory. They need someone in there to keep them honest. And you can always trust a Green. A strong Green vote will send them a powerful message. So if you are someone who wants more privatisation of the NHS, then you can vote for Labour or Tory. Doesn't really matter. But if you don't, vote for the Green Party. Send them that message. If you would like to lift those 250,000 children out of poverty by getting rid of the 2-child benefit cap, you can vote Green. If you want to get rid of it, you can vote Green. Keep it, you can vote Labour or Tory. Doesn't really make a difference. A Green vote this year is something that you can do safe in the knowledge if you're wanting to get rid of young Justin here. fine. You're going to get a Labour government. But if those other issues, Will say he wants you to lend him your vote. You can't lend a vote. Once you put that X in the box on July 4th, that's it for the next few years. You have agreed that's the direction that you want the country to go in. If you don't want the country to go in that direction, please, for the love of God, tell them, vote Green.
Scott.
So I thought the question was, what did we agree with about the other candidates?
No. The question was, would you like to sum up?
Very well.
I was going to ask that. I said that would have been the question that I would have asked if I had time.
I see, okay.
Is what you agreed with the other parties. But because we're coming to the end of the evening, I want to give you an opportunity just to sum up your thoughts for the night and how you want to actually.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
In 2007, the bankers and the rich created a financial crisis. And since then, successive New Labour, Condem and Tory governments, let's not forget the Lib Dems, don't let them off just because they're not here, have sought to make us pay for that crisis through wage freezes and austerity, cuts in public spending. We are now in this country facing a new period where there is a new crisis that has happened in the past several years. And once again, the ruling class, the capitalist class, is seeking to make us pay for their crisis. Fundamentally, the only way the working class and ordinary people in Britain can fight back against this is by getting organised and working together. That's in the trade unions. That's through fighting industrial action for wage increases. I'd love it if all the bosses just gave us pay rises out of the kindness of their hearts, but I think we know they're not going to do that. But it also means fighting politically as well. And that means getting organised into a new party of the working class, which should include all forces on the political left, including trade unions, socialist groups, community campaigners, anti-war campaigners. And that is the main purpose of why I'm standing in front of you here tonight, is if we are going to resist the attacks that are coming from the ruling class, the rich, in the next several years, and they will be worse than they were in the post-2007 period, we have to stand together and to fight and to get organised. I hope people will see, I'm not under any illusions that people will not vote Labour. All indications say that there's going to be a Labour government on July 5th. And, okay, sure, some people will have hopes. Will have hopes that things might get a bit better. But ask yourself, in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, if nothing has changed, what is it that we do? We need a new party of the working class.
Thank you very much, Scott. Les, would like to respond to that from a reform point of view?
Well, I want to actually don't sum up the evening. I've got a serious thing that I would like to talk to people about that I feel is not being answered, and that is the epidemic of people with dementia. We're being told we're looking for a cure, but this is not the party's view, this is my own personal view. If we look at the system, since we started using organophosphates in this country in 1977, ever since then, the number of people with dementia has risen and risen and risen. Children with ADHD and all the rest of the things, that has risen as well. A few years ago, they brought out a nicotinoid, which was a new one, and if you sprayed it on bees, the bees didn't die, but they couldn't find their way back to the hive. Farmers tell me that years ago, when we had the mad cow disease, I knew a farmer in Wootton Bassett, and he said mad cow disease was not created by what the government said, which was feeding sheep to cows, but the organophosphates every year were poured down the spinal column of every cow, bull, everything else, and he swore, and a lot of farmers swore, that that was causing the mad cow disease. But the government, everybody else seems to be ignoring that. They're looking for a cure, and they're not looking for the reason why. Personally, I think it's too much of a coincidence that this has happened since that time, and nobody's taking that into consideration. I'm not saying it is what it is, but it's funny that that's what's happened since then.
Okay, thank you, Les. Debbie, any closing thoughts?
Yes, we face a very frightening future with either a Labour It looks like it's going to be a Labour government or a Conservative government or a coalition of new Conservatives. We face a frightening future, and I think it's time we tear this up and start again with independents who are not controlled. You need to take back your power. This is about you. It's not about us. It's about you taking back your power. Everyone feels so disempowered, and I understand that, but we shouldn't feel like that because we can take it back. And I think we're at a fork in the road. I really do, in terms of the future for our children, our grandchildren, for all of us. In Swindon, 3 issues I'm going to end on, which I think are the most important. The housing crisis is the most important issue in a rural area or in the town centre. There are solutions on the table that Swindon Council is not using. They've got reserves of money, there's housing stock available, they have the rights to take over private residential property, and there's about 1,000 that are empty. We can start to address the housing crisis. It's simple, they don't want to do it because they're making money. Housing crisis needs to be addressed. We do need to build more council houses and make sure they're available as tenancies to people. That's another thing. Second thing, which is going to come down the line in Swindon as a low emission zone is coming. It's hinted, there's a great big hint in the Swindon plan. And I'm sorry, but it looks like we're going to have, if we have a Tory MP in the north and a Labour MP in the south that used to work under Sadiq
And your last
Khan,
point, Debbie?
they will introduce it here. We must stop this madness. The money needs to go back to us, our public services, and us, the people.
Thank you very much. And we're left with the last two. So, which way to go? Let's start with Justin.
I want to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you. I was never studied politics. I never worked in politics. I complained about the overgrown hedge at the end of my road, demanded the councillor presented himself to me to sort it out. He started laughing. I said, I don't think you're taking this seriously enough. He said, is this property rented? I said, yes. He said, it's your hedge. When are you going to get it cut? I was very embarrassed, but he then said, if you care that much, do something about it for the wider community. 24 years later, I've been proud to have spent 10 years as a councillor, which I didn't miss a single meeting. And as an MP, I've tried to do things differently. We all disagree politically, but as an individual, I've always had one of the highest voting and speaking records. I voted against the government 3 times this year on contaminated blood, on tougher rules for MPs that was won by just 1 vote. So it does make a difference, and removing some of the daft mandatory targets that we didn't need. I'm proud to have been voted the second most helpful MP because all of my resources and focus is on the local community, not speechwriters. You'll have noticed that, the 7 or 10 people who watch my YouTube video of my speeches. And I'm the only MP that's opened up a community office used by over 150 different organisations, which is brilliant, a brilliant way to engage with people who otherwise wouldn't engage with us as our collective representatives. I am so fortunate to have had this position. I've always tried to do my best, like everybody. We're all human, we make mistakes, but I'm proud of my record, and I know I've made a tangible difference to our wonderful community. I love the fact that because I live here, I share and understand those issues, and people can come and tell me what I've got right, what I've got wrong. Even Frida at Supermarine every second Saturday, who gives me a mark out of 10 for my weekly Swindon Advertiser article, so I know whether I need to pull my socks up. Thank you everybody who's given me this opportunity up till now.
And the last word this evening goes to Will.
It's nice to be able to close up so no one can disagree with what I'm saying. But this election is about change. And despite what any of the candidates say up here, it is not a done deal. I am having to look at turning over a 16,000 majority, which is massive. And it's something I think we can do, but every vote does count. And the reason I use the terminology, lend me your vote, is because our party's been guilty of it in the past. We have failed the public and we have let them down. We let the people in the north down and they revolted against us. So I will always say, lend me your vote. And I will fight hard for every single vote because it is not a done deal. If we do win this election, it doesn't mean you're going to have Labour for 10 years. You have to be able to have a mechanism to hold me accountable. And I truly think Keir Starmer is the right person to lead the country. He has reformed the Labour Party. Nobody in 2019 believed we had a chance at winning an election. And now we are here as a serious party with a fully funded manifesto. So I would ask you, lend me your vote. I will not disappoint you. and have a great evening.
So thank you all very much for all of you giving up your evening to be here with us tonight. Thank you also very much, Les, for Debbie, Scott, Andy, Will, and Justin, who have entertained us and given us food for thought. It is good to have you with us, and it's good to hear all of your different opinions. I am the Vicar of Highworth, and I hope you don't mind if I suggest that we finish the evening with a prayer. I'd like to finish with an old Gaelic blessing, which some of you will probably know. We do this in our family worship, is encourage you to actually use your hands. You've all been sitting with your arms folded or tucked in your pockets or whatever. If you are able to use your hands, you might want to join in with me. It goes like this. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm on your face and the rains fall softly on your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold each one of us in the palm of his hand. Amen. So thank you all very much. I think there's still some tea and coffee and some cakes left over there if you would like to. But go safely, go well, and enjoy the rest of your evening.